I was dumped by the family because CIS holds me responsible for her divorce. Years later, I suddenly receive an email with all the details and supporting documentation. I thereby destroyed her life nearly 7 years ago. At the age of 22, I, 29M, lacked the financial stability to independently rent an apartment. Because everything had happened so quickly, I had little time to psychologically or financially prepare myself. All of this was caused by my 37-year-old sister, Hannah, and I have never been close due to our large age difference. When she was 27, she wed Pete, a 39-year-old boyfriend, and the two of them stayed together for 3 years. 3 years into their marriage, Hannah accused Pete of having an affair with one of my friends, leading to their divorce. Since I had just started working after college, I had been living with my parents and wanted to save some money before moving out. That arrangement was also acceptable to my parents, but only until my sister filed for divorce. She suddenly returned home one day, sobbing uncontrollably, and said that her spouse had been unfaithful to her for 6 months. She had filed for divorce. She continued by calling me out for bringing my friend Emily, a 28-year-old, to meet him. Pete, a licensed nutritionist, volunteered to assist my friend Emily in her weight gain endeavors. It seems that she was the person Pete had been having an affair with my sister with. I had been the one to introduce him to her. Emily and I were not close, but I knew for a fact that she was a decent woman and would never have anything to do with a married man, so I was astonished. Moreover, it was uncharacteristic of Pete to cheat. He was completely enamored with Hannah and could not say enough positive things about her. I therefore found it quite difficult to accept that he had cheated on her. Though she never had any evidence of him cheating, my parents believed her right away and didn't even question anything, even though I had my concerns. They simply accepted her word for it. I won't hold it against them because in the end, they wouldn't care who was right. They would always pick their own daughter over their son-in-law. I couldn't understand why they quickly ejected me based only on Hannah's statement. One day, just because I'd introduced Emily to Pete, she stormed in, had a fit, and managed to get my parents to toss me out. She said that I had ruined her marriage, and my parents believed her. I tried to stop my parents since I was upset for some reason, but they weren't prepared to hear me at all. They threatened to physically eject me if I didn't leave. I had lost both my family and my home in a single day, and I had no idea where to go. I spent almost an hour sobbing on the pavement with everything I owned before gathering the courage to spend the night at a friend's house. For the next few days, I made an effort to get in touch with them every single day, but I was unsuccessful. I was fortunate enough to be housed at my friend's till I could find a flat on my own. Regretfully, my parents were of the opinion that I was to blame for the divorce and that I was in the wrong in this situation. Before throwing me out, my parents had actually told me that they were disgusted by what I had done, which was absurd because I wasn't the one Pete had cheated on him with. When I tried to see them, my mother threatened to call the police if I didn't leave, and they had banned my number, so I couldn't reach them at all. After that, I at last understood that they were sincere about this, and that I was to blame for whatever had occurred. My sister has always been the favorite child, so I don't think I had any reason to be surprised. My parents constantly seemed to be sidestepping me because they had never truly prepared for a second kid. Even if I didn't really enjoy it as a child, I had no idea it would eventually lead to something so significant. Now that I think about it, I guess I should have anticipated it. To be honest, though, I doubt that anyone in my position could have predicted something like this. In any case, during the following few weeks, I attempted to make sense of everything by myself. I couldn't talk to Pete since he blocked me too, which didn't make sense to me, and Hannah and my parents had effectively cut me off since I had no means to contact them. Pete and Hannah had moved out of the house they shared to live with their separate parents, so I was unable to locate him either. I tried to reach Emily, my final hope of learning the truth, but I was unable to make through to anyone involved. Emily and I weren't particularly close, as I've already mentioned, but I had to get the job done. I asked her to get together so I could give her the rundown on the circumstances. She angrily rejected what Hannah had said about the affair when I inquired if it was true. She seemed sincere to me. Emily informed me that she had only had a few professional encounters with Pete. Thus, there was nothing at all going on between them, and she couldn't understand why Hannah would make such a negative statement about her. She went on to tell me that she had been seeing a reliable man for a few years, and that she would be getting married in a few months. She even showed me several images, and her explanations were far more credible than Hannah's. Even though I lacked evidence, I had a gut feeling that Hannah had been lying about the true cause of the divorce. However, I was unable to return to my family because I lacked proof, and I most definitely couldn't return without it. Despite everything my family had done to me, I was sorely missing them at the time when I was yearning to return home. But eventually, I managed to move past that and continue living my life. In order to have something to divert my attention, I was able to locate a spot and make my career my life's work. It was a better form of coping than just sitting around feeling down, especially since I also had bills to pay. Even though I was in a lot of pain and had no other choice, I knew that I had to continue regardless of my family's support. After many years, I'm currently leading a far better life. My 2-year girlfriend and I recently got engaged, and I relocated from our little flat to a much larger one. What turned out to be a game changer for me was our engagement post, because a few days later, I got an email out of the blue explaining Hannah's divorce in detail and providing me with all the information I needed, along with supporting documentation. Although Lisa, my 30-year-old fiancée, primarily shared our photos on Instagram, the photo from our engagement also appeared on her Facebook page, where it was seen by a larger audience. In addition, it was a publicly visible post, so many people saw it, including Pete, my former brother-in-law. Since my fiancé was a doctor, it so happened that they had met at a conference a few years prior. He eventually found me on Facebook after I added him. For the first time, I felt happy that it truly is a small world. A few days after our post, he contacted me, but opted to write me an anonymous email rather than contacting me on social media. It had been several years since his divorce, and he didn't want to seem like a disgruntled loser who still hadn't moved on from what had happened. So he did this, he explained later, so he wouldn't feel uncomfortable about what he was doing. Furthermore, he felt awkward and self-conscious about contacting me again on an incident that occurred so many years ago, because he was the one who had blocked me in the first place. Regarding the email I received, it had all the details and documentation of the events that occurred 7 years prior. I was astounded by what I saw as I went through it. It seems that my sister cheated on Pete, rather than the other way around, as she had been claiming for a long time. Not only was that a massive lie, but what was even more intriguing was the fact that, exactly as she had claimed, she had been having an affair with one of my friends while cheating on Pete. At the time, Hannah's neighbor's grocery business employed my friend Frank, who is 28 years old, as a cashier. Since I had never really seen them together, I never would have connected the dots myself. They had probably covered it up very well, but not sufficiently for Pete to remain in the dark. When Hannah was questioned, she told Pete that it was all my responsibility because I had introduced her to Frank, and even mentioned to her that she was a quite decent singer herself, and that he needed her assistance. After she consented to assist him, they unexpectedly fell in love. She even claimed that I was aware of it, which contributed to their prolonged secrecy. All of this was obviously a big deception, and I had no idea that Frank and Hannah were even dating. When he learned, he became furious and blocked my entire family. Something he now acknowledges was a bit foolish of him, but he'd been so furious that he hadn't really thought through what he was doing. Naturally, he told me everything in person, since he didn't want his identity to be linked to the email, which was designed to be as impersonal as possible. But I managed to work it out. The evidence he attached consisted of several screen grabs from emails that my sister and Frank had exchanged, describing how simple it is to trick Pete. They were bursting with declarations of love and arrangements for their next meeting place. She had even signed off on the emails using her middle name, which not many people know, so there was no way for her to refute any of this. I had her completely captured. After looking through Lisa's Facebook friends, I came to the conclusion that Pete was the one who had given me this email. Upon having a gut feeling that this was undoubtedly related to social media, I contacted Pete after I eventually located him on her list. We arranged to meet a few days ago, and he informed me that Emily, who had met him a few years prior, had told her family what Hannah had told them. I was feeling very bad about telling her to keep my side of the story to myself, because if I hadn't, she would have most likely told Pete, and I could have established my innocence long ago. In any case, a few years prior, they had crossed paths, and she had inquired about his divorce from him. After they had a conversation, he had finally discovered what Hannah had told us. He said that he felt uncomfortable talking to me about it and telling me the truth, but he refrained from doing so. My life would have been much easier to deal with if Pete hadn't been so easily embarrassed. However, I did forgive him because I knew he would support me in my efforts to completely destroy my sister, and I needed his assistance. Hannah undoubtedly lied to my parents in order to receive financial support during her divorce, and she even put me under the bus just to be safe. She knew that after just one discussion with Emily, I would be aware of the truth. I found it incomprehensible that someone could be so self-centered, particularly if they were my blood relative. My parents had accepted the lies she had told them throughout her divorce, and I'm sure she had never tried to correct the record either. She was aware that she would have faced severe consequences if our parents had found out the truth about her being the infidelity, and she simply could not take the chance. Unfortunately, it was now available, and I planned to utilize it to wreck her life in the same way that she had destroyed mine all those years prior. Since I hadn't seen my family in 7 years, I wasn't sure if they were still living in the same house, but fortunately, they weren't. Before I showed up, I checked with an old neighbor of mine, and I was relieved to hear that Hannah was still living with them. I didn't find that shocking because Hannah had always been a couch potato and detested doing any kind of work. She would so undoubtedly move in with her elderly parents and force them to take care of all household tasks if given the choice. Nevertheless, Pete and I unexpectedly showed up at their place 2 days ago. We entered before my mom had a chance to process what was happening when she opened the door. We were once again a happy family because my dad and Hannah were also in the living room, but that didn't last long because their expression changed as soon as we walked in. My dad started threatening us right away, saying that if we didn't get the hell out of his house, he would call the police. I retaliated immediately, telling him that he could do anything he wanted to do, but only after he had read the documents we were going to present them. Hannah excused herself, looking like she was about to throw up, and went to her room, leaving my parents looking bewildered. I assumed she was trying to get away, but there was no need in trying. While I was explaining the true story, Pete continued to display the divorce papers and the screen grabs of Hannah and Frank's communications. Pete also told my parents that Hannah had to give up our family jewel, my grandmother's diamond ring, as part of the settlement since, as a high school teacher, she couldn't afford to give him the money. She was forced to sell the ring as a result. That was the icing on the cake for my parents, who were terrified by what we had told them before. As my dad insisted that Hannah provide an explanation for all that had transpired, we watched the drama play out. My dad immediately ejected her from the house when she continued to attempt to conceal the truth and lie in spite of all the evidence against her. After packing her belongings and giving her the bags, he yelled at us to leave their house immediately. My sister begged and pleaded with my parents to let her back in, just like I had all those years ago, and I didn't need to be told twice before leaving with Pete. I'm overjoyed that this was a perfect example of karma. After a few days, my sister suddenly showed up at my house a few hours ago and insisted that I immediately make amends with my parents. I informed her I no longer owed her anything, even though I had no idea how she had discovered me. I made up with her for the time she had devastated my life, and now we were on equal footing. She started crying and calling me a monster as soon as I said it, so I believe she really lost all of her pride. Despite her theatrics, I didn't care and closed the door while she sobbed uncontrollably. To ensure that neither of us would be bothered, I just put on my headphones and listened to music as my fiancée, Lisa, worked in her study. Hannah eventually went away from us, but not before leaving a note written in marker on my door to serve as a constant reminder that I was nothing more than a monster out for retribution. To be honest, I don't feel the least bit regretful for what I did and don't see anything wrong with it. Hannah, though, seems to be rather certain that I'm the bad guy in this situation. I merely dealt with her the same way that she had dealt with me years before, with the exception that I told the truth, and she did nothing except lie and ignore me. What are your thoughts, guys? Am I in the wrong for upsetting my sister and forcing her to move out 7 years after she accused me of being the reason behind her divorce? First update. So even though Hannah was sent out a week ago, she hasn't stopped pestering me. When she contacted me for the 14th time today, I had to frighten her with the fear of the police before she would stop. I'm not even sure how she found my address or phone number, but it's the last thing that interests me at the moment. Hannah is attempting to elicit sympathy from me because apparently the pay of a school teacher is insufficient to support her. But I don't think that's the case. She's simply angry because our parents kicked her out, and now she has to find a place to live and pay for her own groceries, rent, and energy. I'm not too sad for her then. In case you were asking, the answer is yes. I have blocked her phone multiple times. However, it seems pointless since she is inviting her buddies to join conference calls without my consent. My parents are just as horrible as Hannah, if not worse. They discovered me on Facebook and also noticed the post regarding my engagement. They even expressed a wish to attend my wedding, so they want to be a part of my life again. They expect me to just invite them to my wedding, which is meant to be a highly important date for me, but they haven't apologized yet. I'm not sure how these folks musters the courage to say such offensive things, but at least I won't be answering any of it. Since there's really no going there for real, Lisa and I have had a great time reading their texts. It's all just so very awful for them right now. Second update. After I threatened to report Hannah for harassment yesterday, she returned to my residence. She threw herself across the bonnet of my car as I was ready to go for work, and she wouldn't move until I spoke with her. I finally gave in to my frustration and called the cops this time. She wailed and shouted and did her best to paint me as the villain while they hauled her away. Sadly though, no one found her depressed girl act convincing. It took some time to file charges against her, but I didn't want to let this minor incident spoil my day. So as soon as I finished, I headed off to work. She was my parents' favorite, so I was confident they would help her whatever, and my suspicions were confirmed. After providing for her, my parents sent me a long text message apologizing for being so hard on them for an honest mistake they had made over 10 years prior. Nothing that my parents and sister had made me go through was dishonest or even an error, which made it comical. They were nasty, no doubt about it, but they also knew what they were doing. Even though they knew I had nowhere else to go, it didn't stop them from tossing me out onto the street. I see no reason to be kind and forgiving now that I can do the same to them. I texted my parents back, telling them to quit fooling themselves because they had no right to dictate to me what I could or could not do 7 years ago. Since I haven't had time to read my messages, I haven't blocked them yet, but I will do so shortly. By then, perhaps I should be permanently free of this family. Third update. Upon returning home from work, I noticed that my parents had sent me another lengthy message on social media. I swear, this was the funniest thing I've ever read, and Lisa and I went through it together. The impoverished people probably have no idea that nothing they say or do anymore even hurts me. I find it hilarious how naive and pitiful they are. They told me that they had brought Hannah back in, and that they feel both of their children deserve another chance, indicating that they still think of us as family. As though I'd ever been at all incorrect. Thus, even though they had welcomed my sister back, they also anticipated that Lisa and I would visit them for dinner at some point, so that we could resolve our issues amicably before the wedding. It was daring of them to presume that I would want them at my wedding at all. After we laughed heartily at their foolish message, I promptly replied to them, stating that I was quite content to live far away from them, as I had for the previous 7 years, and that I had no interest in anything they had invited us to. I would always be grateful to them for demonstrating to me that I was better off without them. They were completely unnecessary, and I had no desire for their purported pardon. In order for them to play happy family as happily as they had up until now with my sister, I blocked them permanently after that last SNS, since I wasn't even interested in laughing anymore. I was finished and gone. Sadly for them, I'm sure they'll make an effort to contact me again in the near future. I am no longer experiencing it. Right now, Lisa is my only family, and I'm content with that. Regretfully, neither my sister nor my parents have ever been able to see past themselves, and I seriously doubt that they ever will. Thus, I'm actually looking forward to them talking to my lawyer the next time they get in contact with me.